Welcome to my studio. My name is Lucinda. I'm 24 years old and I am based currently in the back end of nowhere, aka South Down. And I'm here to chat to you guys today about upcycling, about getting the most out of your clothing, and about how, for me, making and creating and using my hands actually really kind of saves me and helps me a lot with my mental health. So yeah, let's jump into it. This is one of the jackets from my most recent drop on my website, which you can check out at lucindagraham.co.uk. There probably isn't going to be a link, but I'll pretend I'm an influencer and like point at the link somewhere. It's not going to be there, but it makes me feel good. This fabric here is a vintage toile de joie. Makes it sound a bit extra, a bit fancy, but it's essentially any fabric that kind of has these little people, this kind of repeat scene. Basically, it's like a blown up image from a china plate. So all of the fabrics that I use for my creations are always vintage, sustainably or ethically sourced, because I feel like that's really important, to not mindlessly add more product into the planet than we need. Probably about a medium. And I don't know if you guys recognize the shape, but actually I took a lot of shape inspiration from bombers and from workwear jackets, which I wear a lot of. I love utility wear, I love menswear. It just fits with my lifestyle, it kind of works for me. First of all, I'm going to show you guys how to take a pattern from a piece of clothing that you already own and then transfer that into making something else from it. This here is a vintage French workwear jacket. You can get these anywhere. Mine is from American Madness, who are amazing and have such a great range of vintage styles, especially in this color. I really love the, like, what would you call it, kind of like a royal electric blue. It's really beautiful. I wear it the entire way throughout the summer, as you can see, because it is filthy, so don't pay attention to that. What I'm going to show you guys basically is how to take a pattern from this and how to translate it. So when we talk about a pattern, it's something that's super easy. You can just use like sheets of baking paper, but if you want to order paper, what I recommend is using spot cross paper. So if you kind of zoom up on this, what you can see is spot cross, and these are an inch apart. So even if you don't have a tape measure, you can already really easily kind of gauge what you're working with. For example, this here is a pattern for my front panel. It's a little bit beaten up and it looks really complicated, but I'm gonna kind of show you how to break it down. And I know that a jacket might not necessarily be the easiest thing to start with, but if I can do it, I'm rest assured that you can as well. So if we lay this down beside, you can kind of see the shape. It starts to look like a real piece of something. This here, if we look at the sleeve, this is called a drop sleeve. And the way we have quite a large arch, so that means that when the piece sits on the body, it won't sit like this right up in my armpit. It's probably going to lie similar to this jumper. It's going to sit lower, which I prefer. It gives the jacket a bit more room, it's a bit more cozy, and I prefer kind of an oversized fit anyway. Some people prefer centimeters, I like inches. I just think it helps me to, I measure my body in inches, so it works for me. So always you're going to measure from pit, which is this little, where the seams meet in a little kind of diamond formation in the corner. So you're going to measure from pit right the way across, and that's going to be the chest measurement. So what we have here is 14 inches. What you're also going to do is write these down. But another thing to remember is don't translate your pattern straight away to 14 inches, because what you will also need is extra space. So what we do is a seam allowance, 1 centimeter seam allowance, which isn't that much, it doesn't sound like that much, but this is what a centimeter kind of seam allowance looks like. So it's not that much, but that allows the join of your clothing, so it's not eating into the measurements, if that makes sense. This looks like it's too long, and that's because it is. This is extra fabric that is going to be folded back, so you can kind of see this extra fold of fabric here, and it just means that it becomes really neat and you kind of get that lovely what do you call that? I don't know, I should know, but I'll leave it up to you. You're probably shouting at your screen being like, duh, that's what it's called. But anyway, I feel like Trixie and Katja, it's my show and not yours. Off we roll. So essentially, if you have the pattern for this, all you have to do is flip it on its side for this one. So you actually only need one of these. With most other things, you'll only need one as well. So what I have done is, for my sleeve measurement, this is a little bit more tricky. You can get curved kind of rulers, like pattern cutting. Most people don't have those things at home, and I tend to be a little bit slapdash with how I measure. I don't like being fussy. I like to kind of just get stuck straight in. So with the measuring tape, you can actually just measure the width right the way around. You can kind of lead with your hands like this. So that's 12 inches. So we're going to add a little bit extra for seam allowance again. So what you should be left with once you've kind of done that process, and it doesn't have to be on a jacket, it could be a skirt, it could be a dress, it could be like an overshirt, like a work shirt. It's fairly simple, and there's loads of online patterns that you can download. But I really like, if you have a piece of clothing that you love, that you wear all the time, why not replicate it and kind of get the most out of it. What's essential as well is you're going to measure length. So the length of these will all be different. Length from collar to hem, and the length of the back to hem are going to be different lengths, because the back length is actually longer. Flip this over. This bad boy up here, this is called a yoke, and this actually just allows the jacket to sit more comfortably on the back, and it provides a little bit more swing. So it's kind of more structured up at the top of the back, and it provides a lovely kind of bit of movement, because if you think these pieces are workwear, they're designed to be worn for practical manual labor. So I actually decided to keep the yoke when I made my pattern, which you can see kind of on my jackets here, because I still really liked it and I did want to emulate this style. You want 1 or 2 yokes. I decided to do 2 because when you open up your jacket, you want to have something nice to look at on the inside as well. So I cut 2 patterns for this, and obviously you can see that it doesn't match up, it's actually longer, but that's because my jackets are a bit longer as well. For this jacket, you're going to have multiple pattern pieces. The way that I've done it is slightly different to this setup of this jacket, but you're going to have 1 front panel, you're going to have 1 sleeve, you're going to have 1 cuff, you're going to have 2 parts of the collar. Now this is a basic collar that is just 1 collar fall, but you have 2, which is called a collar stand and a collar fall. These are 2 of the old ones that I had, they're really beaten up, but you can see that this is just a collar fall. But usually on other jackets we have the collar stand. So if you imagine, this is the bit that it kind of stands on. You're going to want your pockets, which we have here, your yokes, sleeve pattern, and your center back, which is going to be this one. Now this one has like darts for movement. I just put little pleats in the back of mine. And so what I recommend is, if you are like really committed to making your own thing, buy curtain lining. Most people use a fabric called a toile, which is T-O-I-L-E, but it's way more expensive, and curtain lining is literally what backs a curtain, and it's super easy to get hold of. They sell it at IKEA, in any sort of haberdashery or fabric store. You can get it anywhere in Belfast or Northern Ireland, really, even in like little small towns, they'll do it. And what you're gonna do is you're gonna pin your pattern. If you imagine this is my fabric, you're going to pin it down, put some weights on top of it, and simply cut around your pattern. So think of it as a kind of jigsaw, and you're just cutting your replica pieces, and you're going to want to patch those together. I really like taking patterns from things that I own, because I find it really difficult to find clothing, which is always something that's kind of affected my mental health. I've always kind of been on the slightly larger side of the scale, not big enough to be considered plus size, but too big to be considered kind of a skinty queen. We know how it goes. I felt like there wasn't really a place for me to fit, especially wanting to access vintage clothing as well, which were never in my size. So when I actually discovered that I could sew and that it was possible to teach myself how to sew, it really gave me a sense of empowerment and the ability to actually make clothes for myself, to kind of celebrate my form. And I guess that's what I aim to do through clothes that I make and commissions that I do for people, is to make people clothes that they're going to keep for years, that are ethical and sustainable, but most importantly, that just celebrate all bodies and allow people to feel so loved and so looked after. Here's another example you can kind of see on a mannequin. I feel like you can get an idea for it on a mannequin rather than on a hanger. So this is kind of a tapestry workwear overcoat. This is one of the larger sizes, which I think if I'm correct, it is a 52 inch. And you can really see what the drop sleeve does, which is it just adds a lot of movement around the bust area, which can be a really frustrating thing for women or other people that identify femme to have kind of a tight chest area. It can be really frustrating having a jacket that you can only button up here and you kind of have to just like let open. So I was trying to really translate my experiences with clothing into this. And so we've got our lovely big huge pleated sleeves. We've got all the drama. I actually widened the cuffs as well. I have a little dainty, tiny, yeah, they're not proportional to my body at all. My cuffs are tiny, but these cuffs we actually made larger. Different bodies carry weight in different places. The last thing you want is to have this amazing jacket that fits you everywhere, but it's cutting off your circulation on your wrist. So we actually extended these and made these longer. I'm just going to turn this to the side for you. Obviously this is focusing on plus size bodies, but I feel like that's important because they're often the last thought and the afterthought in the fashion industry, and that's how I felt for a long time. Even though I'm obviously a very small designer, it's something that I've always tried to include. So you can even see as I lift up this sleeve, you can see the extra movement that we have around here. And we have the cuff at the bottom that is just helping to kind of give it some form of stability. See how you have this extra swing and this extra movement, which kind of emulates the bomber jacket aspect, which I really wanted. I wanted it to feel like a piece that people would put on and it would have this kind of like gorgeous movement. It would feel really rich, not tiny and structured, although I do the other smaller structured shapes. For this one I really wanted it to be roomy and just kind of gorgeous overall. So I guess I'll chat a little bit more about my own personal journey with mental health. It's something that I've always been really open with on my social media platforms and in my friendships as well, but I'm very thankful for this opportunity to speak a little bit more. I find that especially in the industry that I am in, there are a lot of issues that have been coming up a lot recently with gatekeeping, and that is kind of people holding the helm for what they think is acceptable, which is skinny, Eurocentric, able-bodied individuals. And we live in a world full of diversity, full of different levels of mobility, and I feel like those should all be completely celebrated and thought about. Something that I do in my practice is I have the opportunity for people to receive commissions from what I do, and so if somebody has perhaps different levels of mobility, or I've worked with somebody who has a colostomy bag, otherwise known as a stoma, and so I'm really happy to work with people for no extra cost or no extra fee to make sure that they can access clothes that really make them feel really loved and really special. I was in a wheelchair as a child, and I've those feelings of isolation and those feelings of being kind of other are still very fresh for me, even as a 24-year-old, and it's something that you're always having to push aside and be like, you're not that kid anymore, you're Lucinda, kind of like, you know, get yourself hyped up, but in the back of your mind you definitely always have this childlike mentality of being other, of being disabled. I had a carer in primary school, and I think a lot of my early memories, I taught myself that if I wanted to be the best that I could be, if I wanted to be loved, if I wanted to be accepted, then I had to work 3 times as hard as everybody else, because I believed that I was horrendously ugly. I was disabled at the time. I was always a chubby kid. I've just always been big. So I was big. I wasn't like pretty. I wasn't physically like talented. I wasn't good at any like sports or anything. So I was like, right, I'm gonna be the best artist and I'm gonna be the funniest person, and that's gonna be my identity. But of course, when we throw ourselves into identity, even with creative things, that can be such an amazing lifesaver. They never replace these kind of feelings of loneliness, or this idea of being an outsider. And I know that with what a lot of people are struggling with right now in this second wave of old Rona that we're going through, just kind of low-grade anxiety that is kind of always there. And so obviously my creativity kind of stops and finishes in the realm of fashion, but if anybody's watching this and you have creativity in other ways, I guess what I would say is don't allow that kind of perfectionistic little voice in your head to really eke and like feed off of your own insecurity and kind of tell you things like you're not good enough, or you're not working enough, you're not working hard enough, oh look at their work, it could be better, you know, that kind of way, because it just steals the joy out of what you've been naturally gifted at. I could be better at what I do, I'd try, absolutely, but there's always going to be somebody out there that is more talented, better than me. But our responsibility at this stage, at this time of 2020, just let it be over, is to make sure that we are kind to ourselves and adjust how we see ourselves. We're incredibly harsh on ourselves. We see ourselves through a lens that nobody else looks at us. So for me, as that kind of small, stunted child, there's a lot of talk about healing the inner child as an adult, and I think that's really important, and creativity plays such a huge role for me. I know I'm incredibly blessed to have this space that I can come and work in. It's the first time in my life that I've actually had my own studio, but even just shutting the door and knitting, just physically kind of working with my hands, knitting, crocheting, collaging, drawing, sketching, making mood boards online, or doing a photo shoot, or whatever it is, styling. For me, being active and actually working with my hands just provides like such escapism, I think, from the intensity of perhaps my own anxiety and how my brain kind of ticks over. And so I would definitely encourage anybody watching this, give it a go. If you have any questions about furthering wanting to make your own clothes, please drop me a line. But I'm completely self-taught. I'm somebody that came from a knitwear background, so if I can teach myself, then hopefully you guys can too. Let it give you hope, because I was completely useless when I started. It just takes practice and repetition, but there's a million more incredibly talented tutorials online. I hope that this mini tutorial and chat has been helpful, but yeah, just invest in community, invest in each other, and when you feel your mind starting to go to that darker place and kind of comparing yourself and stealing your joy, shut it off and just get stuck into anything, something creative, because I can promise you it will alleviate the heaviness. And yeah, I hope you guys have a lovely day.